Congressman Mike Gallagher is with us now from Wisconsin. He's also with the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, what do your reports say? Do they say that Putin knows he's struggling? I mean, he lost how many commanders now?
Well, it would be impossible for him not to know. Clearly, his initial strategy, a blitzkrieg strategy, failed. So everything I'm hearing suggests that he is now scaled back to concentrate on the east and southeast, and his objective may no longer be controlling all of the country, but rather just establishing a land bridge from Crimea to Russia, taking control of key cities like Odessa and Mariupol. And though it is a testament to the Ukrainians that they've forced him to scale back his ambitions, if he's able to achieve that more modest ambition, it would still be a disaster for Ukraine. And I think the one thing that we've learned throughout this is that Putin really, he believes human life is cheap. He's willing to sacrifice a lot of his own soldiers as well as innocent Ukrainian lives in pursuit of his objectives. So he's clearly encountering friction, but he still is trying to grind out some modest victory through attrition warfare. And if he gets more of a lifeline from China, he may be able to persist far longer than Western analysts understand.
So I want you to hear what Lieutenant General Ben Hodges had to say. He says that we got to get more weapons into them and quickly, but he thinks the pressure's on the Russians. Cut 8.
But I do think that the pressure on the general staff to deliver Mariupol finally ahead of 9 May is immense. 9 May, of course, is this annual celebration in Russia of the end of World War II, or what they call the Great Patriotic War. It's a huge parade in Red Square every year. So obviously they need to have something to parade to show as a victory on 9 May. So I think this date does have importance there.
Well, I think it would be important in the perfect world, but he missed so many other deadlines, and it's about 3 weeks. That's about 3 weeks to do something substantial in the Donbass region. Mariupol will be the link between Crimea and Donbass, and right now they're still holding on unfathomably, unthinkably. But we eventually are giving them the latest shipment to go out to them is the most lethal. I just wish we wouldn't be doing it so gradual. Give the Russians, give the Ukrainians what they need to be successful, even though they're about to take on the Russians in an open field to an old tank-type battle. Here's what Jack Keane said, who chairs the Institute for the Study of War. Cut 7.
I am done underestimating these Ukrainians. They have the skill, they have the will, they got the leaders, and they are determined. And with the proper equipment in their hands, they're going to do very well here.
What do you think? What are they telling you at Armed Services? Do you guys have stuff to give, or are you having trouble getting it?
We do, but just quickly to your point, I think it's very important. More than 80% of the security systems that we've provided to Ukraine since the administration took office has come after the Russian invasion on February 24th. So I can't help but think how many lives we could have saved if we hadn't underestimated the Ukrainians, to General Keene's point, and those weapons had been in their arsenal before the conflict started. We may have averted the whole thing. In fact, when I questioned the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Austin, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, last week about this, one, they admitted that deterrence failed, which they hadn't admitted before, and two, they said the only thing that might have deterred Putin was more hard power. So to your immediate question about this latest aid package, okay, it's a positive step forward. It's about $800 million in security assistance for Ukraine, M-17 helicopters, howitzers, artillery rounds, javelins, armored vehicles, etc. Two things we haven't given them, though, that I think would be very important, and this may sound a bit too in the weeds, but one is something called the MLRS, long-range artillery, as well as anti-ship missiles. We've had reports that these Neptune missiles are going to be backfilled by American-provided harpoons, but clearly I think there's more we can do on that front. And if the Ukrainians can sink more Russian warships like we saw last week, I mean, that is a massive game changer, and that is a huge humiliation for Putin, and that will have long-term impacts on the Russians' ability to dominate both the Black Sea as well as our ability to hold their fleet at risk in other areas such as the Eastern Mediterranean. And the fact that we effectively surrendered the Black Sea at the start of this crisis was yet another self-inflicted wound. So bottom line, Brian, there's much more we can do, and the Ukrainians have stepped up, and they've shown how a numerically inferior force that is armed with good weapons and a superior will to fight can have a devastating impact in modern war.
Very true. Now, just let's pivot if we can and talk about what's going on. There was no doubt about it. As soon as Russia invaded, they got kicked out of the World Cup. They stopped Grand Prix races there. They don't let them compete their club in a club championship. I get it. I was heartened to see that. But when it comes to China, it's a different story. And you point out that, for example, look at the Nets owner. Tell me about the Brooklyn Nets owner.
Well, anytime you have someone with clear ties to the Chinese Communist Party owning major assets in America like Joseph Tsai, you're going to have a massive conflict of interest. And this is a guy who back in 2019 wanted Daryl Morey, who was running the Houston Rockets, to be fired for a tweet that was supporting the people of Hong Kong. And it just illustrates how certain industries, the NBA and Hollywood are foremost among them, have sold their soul to China in order to make a profit. And for whatever reason, and Enes Kanter Freedom was the one who pointed out this contradiction. These same people are quick to condemn Russia and say, we stand with Ukraine. But when it comes to slave labor in China, when it comes to the brutality of the Chinese Communist Party, they're absolutely silent because they're making money hand over fist, and they don't want anything to kill the golden goose in China. And furthermore, Brian, as we look at the conflict in Ukraine and we scratch our heads thinking, how could the Europeans allow themselves to get to a position where they're so dependent on Russia for energy? Well, we are in a similar position with respect to China. Now, it's not for energy, but it's for the manufacturing of all sorts of different goods, whether it's microelectronics or other key industries, rare earth metals. We have allowed ourselves to become dangerously dependent on China. And so one of the lessons of Ukraine for the NBA, for Hollywood, for American manufacturing writ large, particularly where it intersects with the defense industrial base, is that we need to wean ourselves off of our addiction on China before it's too late. And I don't care if the Brooklyn Nets owner wants to make money. American national security takes precedence, and China remains our biggest long-term threat. And if anything, Russia is going to grow more dependent on China the worse this war goes for Putin. He is merely becoming Xi's sadistic sidekick, and they are engaged in the same enterprise, which is to undermine and ultimately destroy the West.
Well, look, we know that Joseph Tsai is co-founder of Alibaba. We know what happened to his business partner. He disappeared. Jack Ma comes back. We haven't heard much from him. He was beginning to talk negatively about the Chinese government. So Joseph Tsai lives here and paid a lot of money for the Nets. Like some other owners, seems to really value the Chinese market, like LeBron James, even like Michael Jordan, who's one of the owners of the Hornets.
100%. And I think the biggest long-term effect of the last 5 years, and a lot of credit goes to a lot of people in the Trump administration who figured this out pretty early, is that we are going to have to go through the painful process of selectively decoupling from China in key industries, particularly where it threatens our national security. And for a lot of American business leaders, they are going to have to choose. I'm sorry, I wish it were different, but there's some areas where there just can't be nuance. You can't sort of half profit off genocide and slave labor in China. There's going to have to be a stark difference. And I just think too many people in America have yet to reckon with this. We see this particularly in the world of Wall Street and high finance, where the very same people that are lecturing us about climate change constantly and trying to infuse so-called ESG requirements into every decision that American free enterprise makes are the same ones that are increasing their investments in China. And China does not care a lick about the environment. So whether it's Larry Fink at BlackRock or other people that lecture us about how bad America is, These are the same people that continue to double, if not triple down on their investments in China. And it's unsustainable, Brian. It's absolutely unsustainable. They will have to choose at some point, and they should choose the side of America. These are Americans. These are American companies. They should act like it.
Yeah, I'm wondering, too, because we saw a couple of athletes defect to China, born and trained in America, because China offered them a ton of money. You got to wonder what's going on there. On top of that, too, Joseph Tsai wanted to defend China, says most people there are very happy, and he doesn't really, says he might be financing slave labor, but never admits to that. He also reportedly asked for Darryl Worley to be fired when he expressed support for the people of Hong Kong. And he has denied that, but we'll have to see.
Well, of course he did, I'm sure, behind the scenes. And by the way, shame on the NBA commissioner in that whole episode, completely just bent the knee to Xi Jinping in China and did whatever was possible to throw Daryl Morey under the bus, and as well as some of his players. I mean, I mentioned Enes Kanter Freedom, who's been absolutely maligned and sidelined because he had the temerity to criticize the totalitarian regime in China. So the NBA is just showing what hypocrisy looks like when it comes to China. And nothing is worth selling your soul to an evil, communist, dictatorial regime like that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. See if people have the same courage, because this whole story is going to be in everybody's lap soon. We have to be overt in arming Taiwan. They'll write the checks. We'll train them and just let them defend themselves. That's got to be our new strategy. Mike Gallagher, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
You got it. 1-866